I ruined my ex's life, and I'm proud of it. Story time. So me and my boyfriend, who we'll call Steve, met in our final years of college. Shortly after we met, we went into lockdown, so all of our schooling was online. Now, Steve was that like bad boy influence. He was not a good guy at all. So Steve became very manipulative. All I wanted was like a nice romantic boyfriend who would do nice things for me. And we had this agreement that if I did all of his schoolwork, his homework, then he would do all of those really nice things for me. We ended up moving in together in like our college dorms. Throughout the relationship, he literally cut me off from all of my friends. He was like, when you're in a relationship, you don't need friends. But you know, of course, it was absolutely fine for him to have friends. He said that if I ever decided to make any friends, he would expose some pretty heavy stuff about me. During all of this blackmail, I would do all of his work and in between just try and squeeze in my own stuff. At this point, I'd kind of grown some balls and I'd decided that I wasn't going to do his own stuff anymore. I had started to fail, so I was now just doing my own work and he had taken control of his own homework. And because I was no longer doing his homework, he told me that he was bored of me and that he wanted to be single. So he told me that he was 100% gonna break up with me, but he was gonna wait to do this until after I had taken all of his A-level exams. So of course I agreed to do everything for him, all of his exams, everything. So Steve was supposed to be taking me to prom. I buy my dress, I book my hair, I get my nails done, spray tan, the whole shebang. My mum even hired a photographer. We went in. Anyway, a few days before prom, he calls the whole thing off. He says that he can't do it anymore, he can't lie about everything, and that he's actually going to go to prom with his best friend, who is a girl. And his friend actually sent me pictures of Steve and this girl hooking up. I'm sure you can imagine, I was livid. Now, I know you're here to know how I ended up ruining my ex's life. So remember the A-levels that I said I would take for him? So I did take them. Decided I was going to put the amount of effort into it that Steve had put into our relationship. So obviously, he failed them all with a big fat fucking 0%. And this was like 3 months before we were going to get our results, so like what was he going to do? So when the day came that he actually found out what his grades was, I have never seen someone lose their shit the way this boy did. And he went on an absolute rampage. All the pictures that he had on me, he posted them all over Snapchat. He told his friends what I'd done, they told their friends. But the absolute hilarious part of it all was that nobody actually cared. It kind of had the reverse effect. All of his friends took my side, because now they obviously thought that he was like an A-class psycho. He then texts me and I'm now 3 months into this brand new relationship with this amazing guy. We have boundaries, we have respect for each other. So he was just giving me a little life update. Turns out that he had to retake every single class because they found out I was the one that had been doing it for him. His mum kicked him out the house, which meant that he then had to get a job to be able to pay for his accommodation. So he was then trying to retake all 2 years of his A-levels and work at the same time. And turns out he just ended up dropping out completely, even in his car. So yeah, he probably won't be able to get a good job for the rest of his life now. And yeah, like I said, I'm proud of it. And that is how I ruined his life. Am I the arsehole for telling my best friend that he deserved to get cheated on? Story time. My friend Steve has recently been having a lot of problems with his new girlfriend Amy. They got together in like August time of this year and it's been an absolute train wreck ever since. And it's not Steve that's the issue, it's Amy. So despite Amy being an absolute idiot, Steve is just so infatuated with this girl. She's cheated on Steve multiple times and shown absolutely no remorse. And every single time she cheats on him, she gives him some random story about how Steve isn't giving her what she needs and that he's not being supportive. It's getting strange. She's even said before that she finds it really, really attractive when Steve gets like super angry and jealous. And Steve is such a mug that he just gobbles it up every time. Amy says that she acts like this because she never had a father figure, so she's got mad daddy issues. And Steve, bless him, is like, I just want to be there for her and help show that men are good and she does deserve to be treated right. So do you, Steve. You deserve to be treated right. Since like September time, Amy has been seeing this other guy who we'll call Dave. Amy is 100% infatuated with Dave. And of course, Steve ain't happy about this. So he and Amy have been arguing a lot about Dave. They've been arguing a lot about this. And Amy's POV is that if Steve can't accept her for 100% of who she is, then maybe they should just break up. Maybe you should just break up anyway, but here we are. So through this blackmail, Steve accepted this. And not just that, they have now entered what Steve calls a semi-open relationship, in which Amy gets to see people she wants to see, but Steve isn't allowed to see anyone else. And this is because Amy fears that Steve will become emotionally invested in someone else. Amy, hon, hold up a mirror and look at yourself. So Steve has agreed to this, but he's been absolutely livid about it for months. But around November time, Amy started to see Dave more than she was seeing Steve. Steve just refuses. And while Steve refuses to admit it to us, Amy is basically in a full-time relationship with this Dave guy. I've put too much foundation on. At this point, she really only has Steve in her life for money and emotional support when her and Dave have arguments. One time, Steve even gave Amy £200 so she could go to an expensive restaurant on a date with Dave. So fast forward to this week, and I am back in my hometown after being away for a little while. So Steve texts me on Saturday and he is like, I hate Dave. Yes, king. He was talking about how he wants to get revenge for him stealing his girl. He basically wanted to turn up to Dave's house and he wanted me to go with him since all of our other friends couldn't. And I had literally just got back the day before, so I was absolutely exhausted, so I point blank refused. I told him that Leah was just an absolute lost cause and there was no way I was fighting anyone for someone that I'd never met before. I told him that Amy was an absolute lost cause and there would be absolutely no way I was going to fight anyone. Steve started getting all icky and begging me to help him, saying that Amy was the absolute love of his life and he needed me to come and get her back. So I refused again and he was like, fine, I'll just go on my own. And that was the last I heard of it until the next morning. I kid you not, I woke up to like 300 messages from our friends. So long story short, Steve had actually gone over to Dave's place to go and get Amy back. But he ended up getting his arse handed to him by Dave. And to make it worse, this all went down in front of Amy. And at this point, I called Steve and I was like, listen, babe, you should probably speak to a lawyer. But he refused since Amy asked him to not say anything. I thought this boy just needs some sort of reality check. So I told him that he had been so dumb about this whole situation. And I think this was a little bit of a trigger for him because he got quite angry. He then started turning on me and said that I was a bitch and I was a snake for not supporting him. Then called me a fake friend, which is the last cause. You don't call me a fake friend. I was done at this point. I was done trying to be Mr. Nice Guy. So I was like, listen, Steve, you kind of deserved all of this. And it kind of makes sense why Amy prefers Dave over you now. May have been taking it a little bit too far. He then hung up on me and we literally haven't spoken since. So what do you think? Am I wrong here? My fiance said he's glad that my ex-husband died. Story time. For some context, I have 2 children with my ex-husband, Steve. Steve passed away a fair few years ago, actually, and I won't go into too much of the specifics of it all. Steve really was the love of my life, and to say that his passing hit all of my family really hard would be the world's biggest understatement. So 3 years after Steve's passing, I met this amazing man. We'll call him Alan. Welcome Alan back to the chat, everyone. Not seen you in a while, Alan. So me and Alan have now been engaged for about a year. At the start of our relationship, Alan was a little bit insecure about the fact that I was a widow. Would constantly ask if Steve had never died, would I still be with him? I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting very confused with all these names. And obviously this made me feel very, very uncomfortable. So I kept my answers very brief. Eventually, he did stop making these comments. I think he just kind of got a bit more comfortable and I stopped worrying about it. Now on to the issue. We went round to my mum and dad's house the other day to celebrate. We'd booked our wedding venue. At this party, there was my mum and dad, Steve's sister and brother, my 2 children, and Alan. Did you get that? Dinner was really, really lovely. We talked about all of our wedding plans so far. We were all getting on. And this was actually the first time that Alan had met Steve's brother and sister. About halfway through the dinner, my mum made a comment about how she was so glad I'd managed to find the spark with someone after Steve's passing. And nobody really paid any attention to this comment. No one, commented back or anything. But then Alan just replied back and said, I'm glad she died. Otherwise, I would never have had you to myself. Read the room. Read the room, Alan, please. So the tone of the dinner after that immediately shifted. It was so awkward. So I don't know what is in these YSL bronzers, but they literally blur. Is that even possible? The vibe after that was extremely tense, especially from my kids' point of view. I think at that point, Alan noticed how off the cuff his comment had been and he just started awkwardly laughing. He was trying to play off his comment as a joke, which made it even worse. Alan, just stop talking, please. Everyone was looking at me. I was looking at them. I just felt absolutely frozen. Like, I literally could not even bring myself to say anything. My kids looked absolutely disgusted, and my eldest got up and walked off. So to cut a very, very long story short, the dinner was just absolutely ruined after that. My kids haven't spoke to Alan for 3 days. So it's safe to say it was incredibly awkward in our house for like a very long time afterwards. So what do you think I should do? Should I call off the engagement? Should I just speak to Alan about how inappropriate it was? I don't know what to do. Am I the arsehole for refusing to tell my husband where I was? Story time. So last night my husband, who we'll call Steve, had some friends over. Ew. So after I had gone to bed, they were being so freaking loud. They were drinking, playing lots of games in the garden, and then they came inside when it got too cold, so they were even louder. So annoying to me because I needed to be up early in the morning for work. So by about 3:30 in the morning, I went downstairs. I was freaking livid at this point, and I said to my husband, please can you stop being so loud? I have work tomorrow. You know, you're being really inconsiderate. And you know, you kind of expect people to be like, yeah, that's not a problem, we'll keep the music down, like we'll tone it down a little bit. No. My husband turned round to me and said, why don't you go sleep somewhere else if you're so bothered? Apparently it was supposed to be a joke and he was quoting a film. But in the moment, it very much pissed me off. So I decided to take myself somewhere else. I decided to go across to our neighbour's apartment across the hallway, and I slept there. So after a while, my husband starts calling and texting me, trying to find out where I am, and I let that bitch ring. At one point, it really started to annoy me, so I just replied to a text of him saying, where are you? And I just said, somewhere else. And now Steve is saying that he thinks I've taken it too far, and that he was just drunk and I should have known that it was a joke. He said, I'm in the wrong here because I should have told him where I was. He was really, really worried about me, and I took the joke far too far. So what do you think? Am I wrong here? Am I the arsehole for telling my dad that he's the reason that none of us like our stepmom? Story time! When I was younger, my mum struggled with a load of mental health issues. So when I was 5, my mum and dad ended up breaking up, but my dad really, really wanted my mum to still be in our life. He got full custody, but he would let us go and stay with her on occasion. So eventually my dad ended up meeting someone else, and my stepmom is called Amy. So as time went on and as they got a lot more serious, my dad would start to compare Amy to our mum. He'd compare literally everything, like parenting style, cooking, looks. It was weird. And fair play to Amy, at this time she never overstepped any boundaries. She was always really, really respectful. So when I was 13, my mum's health just absolutely hit the floor. She went downhill really, really fast, and when I was 14 she ended up passing away. But now my dad began doubling down even more on the mum competition that he had going on between Amy and my actual mum. Even though my mum was like literally dead, he would still make remarks about how my stepmom was so much better than her. Not really too sure what he was trying to achieve with this. So dad is still continuing on with this your stepmom's better than your mum charade. One point he even tried to ask us to stop calling her Amy and call her mum. I think that one's gonna be a no, Steve. He'd be saying things like, she's your only mum now. It wasn't that big of a deal when mum was still alive, but now that she was gone, it really, really felt like he was trying to replace her in our lives. Unintentionally, it kind of really, really ruined our relationship with her. We recently found out that my sister is pregnant. It's unintentional, so she was holding off on telling my dad and Amy. Really, really sadly though, she ended up losing the baby, and my parents were there to support her for that. We recently found out that Amy was really, really saddened by the fact that we felt the need to keep the pregnancy news from her. So my dad then got us all together and spent a solid 30 minutes screaming at all of us. Like, good work, Steve, that's definitely gonna help. He was calling us all sorts of things. He was calling us cruel. Then began blaming me, saying that I was being unfair and I was ostracizing Amy. And whilst this is going on, he is referring to Amy over and over again as our mum. And at this point, my sister absolutely lost her shit. She snapped and said that our stepmom isn't our mum. She never will be, nor did we ask her to be. Amy then got really, really upset by this and started crying. Dad then started yelling at us even more, started shaming my sister for what she'd said. At this point, I was so fed up. I was so bored of this conversation. So I was like, hon, you're the reason why we don't like her. I said, maybe if you'd not spent all of these years shoving her down our throats, maybe we'd have a bit of a different relationship with her. And maybe then we'd have seen her as more of an actual part of the family than this random woman that was trying to take over our mum's spot in the family. So my dad has now taken these words, twisted them without any context, and started telling every single member of our family. And the family is now... Oh my god, this smells like peach. The family are now calling me rude, disrespectful, hateful, bitter. So what do you think? Am I wrong here? Am I the arsehole for being homophobic? Story time. So a fair few years ago now, I worked in this fairly corporate environment. So within our office, there was this couple. We'll call them Amy and Stacey. Amy would work there full time. She was doing really large hours like me. And Stacey joined a year or so afterwards and she wouldn't work as often. So eventually me and Amy got on really, really well. Now when Stacey joined, she was quite shy. There was already a real strong bond between the group within the office already. And we tried to include her as much as possible, but she just didn't really gel with us the same way other people did. I don't know why, but we did quite often make the effort. Now, I was working with my best mate at the time. I'm just going to call her my friend throughout all this because I don't want to be throwing too many names in there. So one morning before like our shift starts, we're all just chatting, getting our coffees. And this guy goes, "Oh, have you heard that Amy is going to propose to Stacey?" And I was like, well, that's not possible because they're already engaged. I'm actually going to have to bring out the big guns for this because talking about it makes me so angry. And they were like, yeah, I swear I've seen something, but they don't talk about it very often or they're not very public with it. So Amy and Stacey are stood behind me and I turn and look and she has an engagement ring on her left hand. So I turn to the group that I'm in and I go, no guys, look, she's got an engagement ring. So all at once we turn around and look at her. So it's quite obvious that we have been talking about her, but not like bitching. As we all turn to look, she turns to look at us. So she sees that we're looking at her, then they're like, oh, okay, maybe, but is she not just wearing a ring on that finger anyway? And I was like, let's go to Facebook, let's have a look. Got her Facebook open, looked, and it says engaged to Amy. Anyway, this was at 9 a.m. So as soon as our morning brief was done, I was required to work on a different floor that day. And I was originally supposed to be on the same floor as my friend, but I got moved, so I headed off for the rest of the day. The day goes by and my supervisor comes up to me and is like, the managers want to talk to you in the office. You automatically just start shitting yourself, don't you? So I come in and all 3 managers are sat there. I was fucking terrified. And they're like, now we've had allegations of you being homophobic towards Amy and Stacey. As soon as they said that, I knew exactly what they were referencing because obviously that thing that morning had happened where we all turned around and looked at her. And they were like, so we'd like to know what happened. So I told them exactly what I've just told you. And I'm sat there in this meeting and they're like, how can you prove to us that you aren't homophobic? Now listen, I am actually bisexual. At the time, I really wasn't open to talk about it with anyone. And I didn't want the first time for me to tell people to be in this scenario. I just wasn't ready yet. So I'm here like trying to clutch at straws to find reasons why I'm not homophobic. But yeah, they'd been saying that like I hate lesbians, I hate bisexual people. Anyway, these allegations, they didn't go any further. But safe to say, it was exceptionally awkward in the office for a few weeks after that. So yeah, let me know what you think. Am I the arsehole here? My dad admitted that he was in love with me at my wedding. Story time. Okay, so to start, my dad's always been a fucking weirdo. And of course, I absolutely love my dad. Not in like a strange. Growing up, he always made these weird, inappropriate comments to my friends. And at one point, they just refused to come round to my house if my dad was going to be in. Now, I love my parents, but me and my mum are so close. We're like best friends. When I think back, I've always felt slightly uncomfortable around my dad. But my mum never picked up on anything, so I just thought this was normal. Now, let me introduce you to my fiancé, Steve. Welcome to A Story, Steve. Woo! Me and Steve, it was love at first sight. We met during college. We'd been together for like 5 years before he popped the question. Easiest yes of my life. Now, my dad had always shown a lot of animosity towards Steve, but I was just thinking he was like an overprotective dad. I didn't think he was in love with me or whatever. I don't know how I didn't pick up on this sooner. But when we were planning the wedding, we went through 5 different dates because all of them my dad said that he couldn't go to. I know you're not that booked and busy, Dad. My dad was asking a lot of questions. My fiance did point this out to me, but I just thought it was my dad being a weirdo still, so I didn't think anything of it. This man wanted to know the timetable of the day down to the second. And very specifically, he wanted to know about the time that we would be saying I do. And we were like, well, obviously that's just after the bit where the person says, does anyone have any objections? Otherwise, these 2 people shouldn't get married. We say our vows, then we say I do. So my dad just didn't show up to the day of my wedding. I'm waiting at the top of the aisle, waiting for him to walk me down. Anyone see my dad? No, great. I just thought that he was being silly and I walked down myself. And except for that, the whole ceremony was beautiful. So then we get to the question that we thought would be the least of our worries that day. Does anyone have any reasons why we should stop this wedding? My dad came sprinting down the aisle saying, I do. Dad, that's my line, shut the fuck up. We started losing it. We thought it was so funny. We thought, haha, he's been stupidly late. Now he's trying to make an entrance. Like, ha. Then we expect him to sit down and like join the ceremony. And he flipping doesn't. So once again, the question gets asked, anyone got any issues as to why we shouldn't get married? My dad replies again saying, I do. So if you don't know, if this happens at our wedding, you then have to wait for 30 days until you can actually get married. And that was when my dad went ahead and confessed that he was in love with me. He goes in to have this like full-blown meltdown in the middle of the aisle. He's like, I can't let you marry Steve. That should be me. There should be me holding your hand. There should be... And obviously I just stood there in absolute shock and disbelief. This was the day I found out that my dad was an absolute weirdo. Here's how I ruined my own life on my birthday. Story time. So I woke up on my birthday morning expecting a little bit of a princess treatment from my husband and kids. My husband didn't say anything about my birthday. My kids didn't say anything about my birthday. So I just got myself ready and I went to work. I was expecting, you know, like a balloon on my desk or like a card or something. But there was literally nothing. And my manager called me in. His name was Steve. He's like, step into my office. I'm thinking, shit. Anyway, he calls me in. He's decorated his office and he says, happy birthday, hon. And I'm like, oh, finally. He goes, do you want me to take you out for lunch for your birthday, my treat? And it is now like 1 o'clock and this is the only person to acknowledge my birthday. And then he says, do you want to come back to my place? And I was like, okay. We've lost a candle. Anyway, we get to his house and he says, just let me head up to my room for a sec. Now feels like a good time to mention that he'd asked me to put on a blindfold. And I'm thinking, oh, something's about to go down. And I was so annoyed at my family. So he's gone for like 5-10 minutes. It felt like a very, very long time. Anyway, when he comes back, he's like, okay, take off your blindfold. So I lift up my blindfold, expecting to see him maybe in like a cute little butler outfit. But as I am sure you can imagine, that is not what I was met with. So I lift up my blindfold and I see my co-workers, my husband, my mum and dad, and my husband's mum and dad. Literally all of my friends. They had all surprised me. They had a cake, they had balloons. And I was on the couch, butt naked. Am I the arsehole for asking my boyfriend to stop being friends with his girl best friend? Story time. So I know how this sounds, but stick with me. So me and my boyfriend Steve have been going out for about 2 years now. It has all been going absolutely great up until now. So Steve has a best friend who we'll call Amy. Their relationship makes me very, very uncomfortable. About 4 years ago, Steve and Amy actually hooked up. He said it was just a one-time thing and he very quickly realised that they were better off just friends. So he told me this very, very early on in our relationship. He made me feel very well respected. He was very open and honest. He answered any questions I had about it. You know, he had a life before me. He could do what he wants, but I just really, really appreciated him being so open and honest. So one day at the start of our relationship, Steve looked really upset. So, you know, like the supportive girly I am, I was like, hey honey, what's up? And he mentioned that he had spoke to Amy and told her that he was getting serious with someone. Me. And apparently she just burst into tears. Like, chill the fuck out, Amy. This took Steve back a bit. He was like, you good, bro? And anyway, she turned round to him and told him that she was so upset because she always thought that him and her would end up together. Even though Amy had a boyfriend at the time. So Steve and Amy literally weren't anything. They were just friends. Both of them had partners. They both agreed before anything happened as well that, you know, they weren't looking for anything serious in each other. They were just having fun in between relationships. So he felt a little bit blindsided by this information and he didn't speak to Amy for like 6 months. Randomly, on this rando Tuesday, Amy calls Steve. First of all, why is that number not blocked? She calls and is like, Steve, I'm in a bad place. Me and my boyfriend broke up. Yeah, probably because you didn't actually like him, Amy. And she was saying that through this breakup, she had realised that she really missed Steve's friendship. But you do, hon. So Steve comes to me and asks me if I'm comfortable with him meeting up with her. And listen, I'm a cool girlfriend. Do what you want, babe. But I said you need to make it very, very clear to her that you are just going to be friends. I have been with Steve now for 2 years and I met her twice. Anytime I'd invite her out with us, anything in a group, she would always decline. I just didn't really think too much of it, to be fair. However, a little bit suspicious, she would always go to group events when I wasn't there and it was Steve going on his own. So after this initial meet up, Amy would start to call Steve and be like, are you on your own? Is your girlfriend there? Can we meet up? She'd had a bad day at work. She'd be like, I just need some alone time with my bestie Steve. So I finally lost my shit last weekend. So he had posted a picture on his story of him and Amy out for drinks. So just for some context here, I had invited her to 6 different things throughout this year, but she said that she couldn't commit to anything till June 2024 because the schedule just wouldn't allow it. Amy, if Vogue can get 40 of the most booked women in the world to pose for a cover, you can come to one of my drinks. So I decided to raise this with Steve, and I was like, it makes me really, really sad that you meet up just you and her. You only ever see each other when I'm not there, and every time I'm away, Amy is suddenly free. And this is when Steve said that I was overreacting. So what do you think I should do here? This boy lied about his age just to date me. Story time. So back when I was in my last year of college, there was this new girl that tried to come to our school. So long story short, me and Amy became like best friends, and like her family sort of became my second family. Anyway, Amy had a brother and we'll call him Steve. Me and Steve ended up getting pretty close. Like I say, I was there all the time. His family were like my family. And I think it's important to keep in mind that Steve did not go to my school. Okay, now you've got the context, let's get into the tea. So over time, me and Steve just started to get so flipping close. Randomly, one day, he turned to me and was like, how old are you? And at the time, I was 17. And he turned to me and said, oh, I'm 17 too, but my 18th birthday is coming up. We need more sparkles here. And then it wasn't that long after that till we started properly dating, like boyfriend and girlfriend, sleepovers, you get the vibe. So one day at lunch, I ran in to Steve's cousin. She went to my school. We love a small world moment. We're chit-chatting away, getting to know each other because I didn't really know this girl all that well at this point. And she's like, oh, are you still dating Steve? And I was like, oh, how do you know that? Because at the time, I just had no clue that this girl was his cousin. I was confused as to how she would know this. Also, wasn't really that public knowledge that I was with a guy. That is when she's like, oh yeah, he's my cousin. Skin right now. Okay. And as we're talking, we're getting on really well. And she's like, so are you going to go to his birthday party? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting because he actually didn't tell me he was having a birthday party. And she's like, oh, that's really strange. Like, it's literally next week. I'm thinking that, you know, you would want your girlfriend at your birthday. Why wouldn't you? And that was when she turned round to me and said, I can't believe he's going to be 16 already. 16, sorry. 1-6, right, cool. She's like, time just flies. He's growing up so quick. And I was like, you mean 18? Like, you mean 18? You mean 18, right? So that is when I found out that he had been lying to me. So here I am, 17, and this boy is 15 years old. What do you mean you're 15? And listen, I've told this story to some people before and they've been like, that's not really that much of an age gap, don't worry. The fact that he lied about this is enough for me. Listen, I have never been in the market for a younger man. I'm really not in the market for catching a case. So now that I have been blessed with this new information, I called up my best friends. They are shook. They start hyping me up, gassing me up. They're like, girl, I broke up with this boy. So that is exactly what I did. I sent him this huge paragraph. Not gonna lie, kind of went off. He replies back, I'm so sorry, I don't want to lose you. Please stay with me. I just replied back and was like, no, sorry, I could never be with a liar. And then I blocked him and I haven't spoke to him since. Am I the arsehole for being mad that my boyfriend only follows Instagram models? Story time. So one day I'm at my boyfriend's house and we'll call my boyfriend Steve. We're sat in the living room, his mum and dad were there, we're watching a film, and Steve literally has the attention span of a gnat, so he doesn't really watch films, but he was scrolling through his Instagram stories, just watching what the world was up to. So I was looking over his shoulder, being a little nosy girl, and I realised that every single story was from like an Instagram model. Either that or it was like all the hot girls from our school. It was bikini pic after bikini pic. Now don't get me wrong, girlies, post your content, get that back. And the longer it's going on, I'm like, oh my god, this is a lot. This is getting quite embarrassing actually. And I was getting so wound up just watching him flick through these stories. Steve got up to go to the bathroom. So I started to unfollow all of them whilst he was on the toilet. I'm like a whippet. Listen, I'm not normally one to go on his phone, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And I was about to be bold with this. I had nothing to hide. So when he came back, I just kept hold of his phone and carried on unfollowing girls. Now, you may think I'm being a little bit dramatic here, but these were the only people he was following. Like, some of his friends weren't even in his following list. So he goes, "Excuse me, what the hell do you think you're doing?" And I'm just there like, "Oh, I'm just following the girls." And I just remember saying, "Is that going to be an issue for you?" Or... He got so pissed off with me, he started acting as if I had betrayed him for unfollowing these girls. "Steve, baby, get your priorities right." He literally turned to me and was like, "Why would you do that?" "I don't know, Steve." I said, "You literally have a girlfriend that you pose with all the time. Like, it's kind of embarrassing to have a following list that looks like that." I can't really remember what happened in this section, but I just kept saying, "It's embarrassing, like, none of them follow you back." And this motherfucker has the audacity to turn around and say, "Well, they used to follow me back." Steve, babe, no, they didn't. Stop trying to inflate your ego. So I thought that, like, we were just gonna argue about this and it was gonna, you know, like, be done with. We were just gonna argue, he'd stop following the girls, blah, blah, blah. So this next bit left me in literal disbelief. This man takes his phone back off me and asks me if he can follow them back. What do you mean? Please bear in mind that I had just unfollowed them all. Honestly, the audacity is kind of admirable though. Like, imagine him wanting to follow these girls back so badly that he's now asking for my permission. So I say to him, like, "Oh my god, of course you can follow them back. Like, that's not an issue at all." He's like, "Oh, really? Thank you. But if you do that, I will literally get on a train and go home right now." Anyway, this was literally like 2 years ago. I would probably deal with this a lot more differently now. But I think this is such an interesting topic. Like, please do let me know if you find following like Instagram models or girls on Instagram is a big red flag. Personally, it doesn't really matter to me that much unless it is like this type of situation where they are the only people that he is following.